Hi.
Did you get your computer straight?
Yeah, it seems to be working now.
And so Pamela is doing the recording.
Pamela is doing the recording. Yeah.
Okay. Good. This is normally the time of day when the traffic is highest here on the island, and so I'm not sure whether our connection will remain good. I'll leave the camera on until you notice audio problems, and then we'll turn it off.
Sure.
Okay. We can assume then that this is recording will make it onto the internet.
Yeah.
All right. It's actually a little advanced that because we had already covered the Sabba-Asava Sutta as well as the Kalama Sutta, both of those suttas are what gives us the full, firm foundation of exactly what the practice is, or in fact, how to tie this activity that Buddhists engage in called meditation,
Right.
which we would prefer that it be called Bhavana or mental development rather than meditation. And meditation is a word that refers to something that Christians did centuries ago, but it's kind of a lost art now. But we're stuck with the word meditation, and that actually is confusing. So by referring to the Sutta number 24, the relay, we come to understand that we practice virtue so that we can purify the mind, and that we purify the mind in order to have purification of view. Once the view is purified, then doubt about what is the path and what is not the path melts away, and we come out of it with full path knowledge of what is the path and what is not the path.
Right.
In the regard to the development of the meditation, the first thing about the Sila is another word that we can use is seclusion, to try to get the mind away from the world, try to get the mind away from all of the pollutions. And normally meditation teachers will say that just by sitting with your eyes closed and your hands in your lap, that at that particular moment your morality is perfect because you're not harming anyone.
Right.
And that's a good way to look at it, but the real issue of morality has more to do with seclusion from the worldly unwholesome. And so just merely being alone is an additive to that issue of morality. Once we have the mind in seclusion from the outside world, then we can develop it until the mind is purified. Now, what we mean by that in this regard is that the mind is free from mental hindrances. In other words, because there's no more turmoil on the outside, eventually through proper practice, there's not going to be any more turmoil or much of it on the inside. And so with the development of the mind to the point of no hindrance, that's when the real work begins.
Right.
And that the real work is actually to completely and fully understand the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path. As we have discussed before, a lot of people think that the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path is sort of like introductory Buddhism, or the beginning, to where in fact the full understanding of the path or the full completion of the Four Noble Truths has everything to do with bringing the student to the level of what you would consider in Western terms the graduation or the finish of school.
Right.
All right. That after that, then the student is on his own. He's beyond training. Just like at a PhD level, after the person gets a PhD in a particular field, he is beyond training in that field. His teachers made sure that he was up to scratch on it. Now he becomes an innovator or a leader in that field. And he is no longer a student in that regard. This is also true about the Eightfold Noble Path and the attending, or the Four Noble Truths actually is a full package. By understanding completely the Four Noble Truths, one then becomes beyond training. This is also another way of saying that one enters the stream of reality, that one is no longer in, let us say, a manufactured mental world. Manufactured by the society, manufactured by all the rites, rules, rituals, things we've been told, and especially from the issues of the Kalama Sutta, to not go then by traditions, by oral traditions, or things that are said by a teacher, or because they're in writing, or because they even sound good, or are there's a thing in philosophy called deductive reasoning. In fact, a lot of the philosophy that has to do with Christianity is based on deductive reasoning. In other words, they're reasoning out things, but they don't really have a full foundation of reality. So they come to a conclusion based upon conjectures, right, rather than based upon facts. And so we as humans do that kind of reasoning a lot, that we think we know something, we become deluded about it, and then we'll reason things about that and come to wrong conclusions. But everyone has the ego of thinking that their reasoning capabilities are correct. Everybody is thinking that they are blessed with a good memory, to where everybody has a very terrible memory and everybody has very poor reasoning skills. But the Buddha, through the Kalama Sutta, recommended none of these ways of accepting data, but only accepting something when we can see it directly.
Right.
And this directliness has to do with a clear mind, a mind that's fit for work, a mind that is, in fact, at the level of first jhana.
Right.
And so that mind that's fit to work is also a mind that has the ability to be free from what they call adventitious defilements, or the hindrances. And that normally when a mind is filled with hindrance, which is the normal state of mind, once we start removing hindrances, the mind can be in one of three other states. Or let us say we can have contents of the mind in three other ways. Besides the normal mind filled with hindrance, there is also the possibility of bringing in joy, to fill the mind as contents filled with joy. We can do that by having visual images or little catchphrases or songs or whatever like that, but we bring joy into the mind. A second possibility is for the mind to remain empty. But that's only for jhana dudes, and it's not really all of that valuable. There's a fourth thing to do with the mind, and that is to put it to work, to investigate that which needs to be investigated, which is in fact the Four Noble Truths. So this is how the package fits together, and a lot of people don't understand that the intention or the reason for meditation is to get the mind sharp enough so that we can clearly comprehend what is suffering and what is the cause of suffering. And one of the ways that we can see what the cause of suffering is if we're in a mind that's fit for work, clear, joyful, and that we can investigate. We can see the constant changing, the constant flux. We actually go into a state of be here now, and we start with that through awareness of the body. But as we expand through the body, through the four foundations of mindfulness, we begin to see actually most of our experience is based upon feeling. And that the body has a huge amount of information coming to it, and can be picked up through the receptors called, the neurons that are on the surface of the skin, etc., like that. And so the body becomes like a big antenna that's picking up all of this constant change. What we begin to understand is two things. One is that the body itself, and therefore the rest of us, is also part of this changing process. And
that would be investigating the body mind, body and mind, yeah,
right,
complex,
which is the second factor of the 7 factors of enlightenment, which is the investigation. By doing this, we also begin to investigate the feelings in the sense that there's a gentle whip back and forth between I like it, I don't like it, based upon all of the changes that are going on.
That's Vedana feelings, right?
Yes.
Like, dislike, and neutral, yeah.
Yes, liking, disliking, and neutral. And one of the things that we start to pay attention to is the fact that our feelings go back and forth in this liking and not liking. Now, liking, when it grows stronger or gets reinforced, becomes the grasping and clinging of sensual desire, and the not liking is the part that winds up manifesting as ill will. But they start off as subtle feelings. We can watch these feelings. We can see these feelings. We can investigate these feelings as things arise and fade away. Once we begin to see this process, now we're beginning to see dukkha as it really exists. Where it exists is in the feelings that are associated with all of the change that's going on.
Right.
Once we begin to see these things, and once we have the concept that when the mind is actually free from ill will, when the mind is free from greed, when the mind is free from delusion, that will leave us in a happy state. And if we're free from those 3 things on a long-term basis, that means that we have a happy life. That's one of the things that you could say that is the promise of the Buddha, or in fact, the third noble truth. Most people, when they think of the third noble truth as enlightenment, as is that it's some whoop-de-doo, whiz-bang kind of thing. And
right.
Because they're trying to create that, they're constantly failing and constantly disappointed. But everybody can experience little Nibbanas when you just go and just rest. Just take a sigh of relief. Just even Archie Bunker, out of the 1970s TV sitcom, the All in the Family, that Archie from time to time would come in and slam the door and scream Edith, and then he would take his coat off and plop down into his easy chair, and he would take a big sigh. And that sigh may last 2-3 moments. If Archie doesn't have that little sigh, that little Nibbana, he would probably die of stress much earlier. That these little Nibbanas are what keeps people going. The fact that we can throw off all of that stress, at least for a moment. But that
right.
means for us, it's a skill to be developed. To throw out the stress. To be completely empty at that particular moment of anything that would be considered dukkha. Once we can see it, we can become free of it. And that we're also beginning to understand what there is about the right path. Now, normally within Buddhism, when people talk about the Eightfold Path, they don't know that they're speaking about an Eightfold Path that's really not a noble path. That the nobility part of the path has to do with the fact that people have become noble through the change of lineage. In other words, only those who really and fully understand the Eightfold Noble Path are actually on the Eightfold Noble Path. Those that don't quite understand the path are on something else. They're on a delusional path.
Right.
Okay, and for instance, the delusional part of the ignoble path is what is right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Because right speech, right action, right livelihood normally have a list. People turn those into rules and say, thou shalt not do this and thou shalt not do that, and then you'll have good Sila. Well, that's a beginner's way of doing it. Actually, the right way to do it is to come to understand that the real teaching of the Buddha, being the Eightfold Noble Path, can be boiled down just to two words, and that is he teaches Dukkha, Dukkha Nirodha, suffering, and the end of suffering. Right. So if we begin to take suffering and the end of suffering as our path, it's not just that that's what the Buddha teaches in a philosophical way, but that's actually the path itself. Is suffering, no suffering. We have to see suffering. We have to recognize what suffering is. We have to know the cause of suffering within the mind. We have to know what it's like to be free from the suffering. And now then, finally, we can begin to understand, without a doubt, what the actual path is.
Right.
Okay. And we already understand from the Sabba-Asava Sutta on verse 11 that it is through the contemplation of the Four Noble Truths in the sense of wisely attending. Wisely attending to the Four Noble Truths means that one must be free from hindrances. That if there's any hindrances in the mind, then we will unwisely attend to the Four Noble Truths. So when the mind is free from hindrance, then we can attend wisely to the Four Noble Truths, and we can come to understand them. And so now what we're going to do...
So your Anapanna practice has to be up to scratch before you can nobly understand the Four Noble Truths.
Before you can nobly understand the Four Noble Truths, your practice has to be up to scratch.
Right, yeah.
But that coming up to scratch is not as difficult as most people who are caught up in the current meditation systems think it is. That I would say within a 10-day meditation course, everyone should have, if they're properly practicing, will have during that 10 days developed a mind that's worth using. So the first 8-10 days could be for clearing the mind, and then we could take a couple of those final 10 days and actually explore what needs to be explored. So that then when the course is ended, then the students will know what to do and how to do it and continue on with that practice that's correct, proper, and beneficial. Now, I had mentioned to you before the Dhamma Cakka Pavanta Sutta, which is known to be the very first sutta that the Buddha taught. And that the people that he taught it to were students of, let us say, the spiritual life, just like Gautama was, or Siddhartha Gautama. And that Siddhartha was sort of better in all of the practices than these guys were. He was like the A student, or the alpha dog in the...
he was naturally inclined. Yeah.
Well, let us say he was naturally determined.
All right.
All right.
So he had the right effort then.
Right. He was able to put in not necessarily right effort, but at least best effort, or let us say wrong effort at the right effort at the wrong practice. All right, so at one group of people that he practiced with were into jhana, and that the other group of practice were into self-flagellation.
Okay.
And that the Buddha mentioned both of these things, but he actually mentioned jhana, not in the sense of low-class, ordinary people stuck at a bar or watching E-Span or whatever like that, but he was actually talking to these 5 guys in the sense of what they had been practicing. So in that regard, the sensual pleasures are the sensual pleasures of jhana, because that's in fact what jhana does, is it brings us into great, that's why they call it bliss and all that kind of stuff. The problem with those high jhanas is that once someone comes out of them, they're back to their ordinary mind. So that path doesn't work. The other path, which is the extreme of that, which is self-flagellation or being able to manage pain very well, comes under the idea of the karma machine, where they're actually flagellating themselves in order to burn off old bad karma so that they can experience the results of the good karma in a more purified or better way. All right? But what they don't realize is that they're not actually burning off any old karma. What they're actually doing is adding bad karma by simply beating themselves. And and Gautama, before he became enlightened, fell into a creek and wasn't able to get out of it. And that's when he realized, hey, if I can't even get out of a creek because I'm so weak with starvation and flagellation, how can I possibly ever get enlightened?
Right.
This is when the story about the girl who tends cattle comes and gives him rice milk. The cowherd girl, and so she gives him the rice milk. Well, you can imagine then, after he gets well fed and starts to practice correctly, that's when he realizes that the actual key to the practice for enlightenment is the first jhana. It's not either the higher jhanas nor the self-deprivation or the flagellation. So when he talks to these monks, these 5 monks in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, is when he explains the middle path. The middle path is not trying to go after good feelings that are either out in the street or in the mind, nor are we trying to burn off old bad karma. But rather the middle path is in fact the Eightfold Noble Path that is understood as part of the Four Noble Truths. And so that was the teaching of the Buddha right from the very beginning. And you can also see that Four Noble Truths was taught to the Kalama people. It's all over the place. In almost every sutta, you'll see little threads and remnants of the Eightfold Noble Path there, because it's so important to the actual spiritual life that someone is going to be on. They have to know what is the path and what is not the path, and they have to know that without a doubt, and they have to know that through knowledge and vision of what is and what is not suffering. Once they come to that, then they can develop what is called right view. Now, the right view of the path is a little bit higher than merely the right view of the view that is purification of the mind. There's no self. What self there is a momentary thought. Like Descartes, I think, therefore I am, should be, in fact, there is thinking, therefore there is thinking. And one of those thinking thoughts is I am. But that the I am is not a reality, it's not an entity, it's just merely a thought that we have from time to time. And surprisingly enough, when we have the thoughts of I, me, and mine, it's part and parcel of suffering. That's mine.
Yep.
Etc. So we're either building ourselves up or suffering loss based upon what we consider belonging to self. But when we're able to see through that delusion of self, only then will we be able to see what the real path is. And the real path starts with right view. And that in the Great 40 is where the Eightfold Noble Path is actually discussed. And so let me get that sutta out and we'll start to go into it. See, not much light because it's late. Normally when I read sutras to the students, it's in the daytime when the lighting is good. This is on, I've got the first edition of the Majjhima Nikaya by Bhikkhu Bodhi, and this is on page 934.
Right.
And it in Pali is called the Maha Chakarasaka Sutta. Okay, the Cakka is the word, like you've heard in Spanish the word for four is cuatro.
Yep.
Okay, or we have the four quarters. Okay, that's this word here all the way back to the Pali. The word quarter is Cakka right here. So that's why it's called the Great 40, is because that's the name of the sutta in the Pali language. And the first immediate question would be, well, why would you have a Great 40 with an Eightfold Noble Path? Because 8 doesn't divide into 40 correctly.
Right.
Okay, at best it comes up with 5 of something, and that doesn't feel quite right. And so we have to understand that really what the Buddha is doing here is he's pulling a trick or a play on words based upon the conversation at the end of the sutta of how it got its name, is because he's actually going to add 2 elements to the sutta to make it a tenfold path. Now, the 2 things that he's going to add to the end of it are the very things that are at the end of the Anapanasati Sutta as the reason for practicing the 7 factors of enlightenment. And that is, number 1, knowledge, and 2, deliverance.
Right.
Well, we've already talked about the issue of the knowledge that we're talking about here. Is the knowledge that's gained at the state of Sotapanna. Once we have the knowledge of how to tread the path, then the deliverance of the path is totally up to the individual. He's
Right.
beyond training. He knows what the path is, and not only that, but if he really is practicing correctly, then he's got the right intention to follow the path. That's the real key, right intention. And that right view and right intention together is what is called Panya. Now, in the ordinary path, or the beginner's path, before we are, as we're beginning to learn to practice meditation for whatever reason, we're introduced to the Eightfold Noble Path in the sense that it has the following groups. It starts with Sila, or morality, Sila, Samadhi, Panna.
Panya.
And that, in fact, if you look at the chariot race, Sutta number 24, the first 3 of the 7 are exactly that. Sila, Samadhi, Panna. You start with Sila. Every child, every community has to have a set of rules, a set of society, and this is something that everybody kind of goes along with. Okay, Zan is calling, but it's really not a good moment for him to, but I'm going to let him on anyway. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep.
All right. You should be coming up now.
Hi.
Hello. Zan, we are already on a call with Paul.
Oh, maybe I disturbed you. Maybe.
We're in the middle of something, and you haven't had the beginning parts of it yet. So you can sort of follow along, knowing that the 2 of us, will cover this information with all of its preliminaries and prerequisites later.
Okay, no problem. And hi, Paul.
Hi, Zans. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
That's good.
Okay, I'm just silently listening. You go on with what you started.
All right. What we're beginning to go into here is the Great 40, number 117. I think I've mentioned that sutta to you before. Have you? Have I talked to you about the 117, the Great 40?
I get
I
early
don't-
stage dementia. I don't remember.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think that you're let me at least review this one point or 2 points, and that is that the Eightfold Noble Path, and more specifically the Four Noble Truths, the fourth truth is the Eightfold Noble Path. So the way that the Four Noble Truths are put together is the primary job of the student of meditation, of the student of the Buddha. So what we do is that we get the mind purified enough through Sila and through removal of hindrances to get the mind fit for work, so that the mind can then be purified of personality view. Once we gain personality, correct view of personality, then the practice that we've been working on allows us to become free from the doubt, specifically the doubt about what is the path and what is not the path. So then this is actually the main part of the practice, and I'll go through several sutras with you on that to show you later. But now what we're talking about is the process of the change of lineage from being an ordinary person into being the Sotapanna, is the one who is now grappling with and discovering what is in fact right view. That's a really, really important point. That's in fact what makes the path. So in the beginning, we start off with Sila-Samadhi-Panna, but at this point of becoming a Sotapanna is where the change of lineage goes, so that the path becomes noble, and that the path then is no longer Sila-Samadhi-Panna. Now it becomes Panna-Sila-Samadhi. And so on the noble path, the Panna, or the wisdom, right view and right intention, is what comes first, not morality. That morality coming first is the way that we train our children. So there's a child's morality. You got to follow the rules. If you follow the rules and do things correctly, you'll get a reward. And if you break the rules and don't follow the rules, then you're going to get punished. This whole concept of the way that the rules operate is what our society is built upon. But originally, these rules were built upon not an entire society, but it was built upon, let us call it a nest, or the family, a small unit of people, and one person in that group is the one who made the rules, and everybody else had to follow the rules. And so in that regard, might makes right, because the one who is mighty makes the rules, and the rules are then enforced through a reward punishment mechanism system. And so this is one's basic morality, and that almost everyone lives with that level of morality their whole life.
All right.
The only question is, who makes the rules? Does the church make the rules? Does the government make the rules? Does my daddy make the rules? Or am I powerful and strong enough to make my own rules and then make other people follow my rules? But in all regards, what we come up with is that the rules are arbitrary. And in fact, in some place or another, the rules were made out of selfishness. They weren't made out of the generosity for the greater good of mankind. They were made to basically protect the wealthy against the poor. It's always been that way.
All right.
I mean, when you talk about theft, if someone is poor, is he going to steal from another poor person? Not if he has a chance to steal from a wealthy man. And the only reason that the poor steal from the poor is because they don't have an opportunity to steal from the wealthy. They would make that change in a minute. And so in that regard, that's what it has to do with, is that all the rules that we've had all throughout history is based on power. He who has the power, he who runs the house, makes the house rules. And you'll hear fathers say that to his daughter. I make the rules here. You either follow my rules or get out of the house. All right? This is the beginning of morality that in Buddhism winds up being the precepts. But that doesn't mean that the precepts didn't originally come out of wisdom. But when they become precepts, when they become rules, they become non-noble and become ignoble, because it has the promises of reward and punishment built into them. But when we have change of lineage, then the morality is based in wisdom, not based in action or based in karma. That we leave that karma rule behind, in the sense that we do good to get good results, follow the rules, or we do bad in order to avoid, or we do bad and that we then try to avoid, but it's hard to avoid getting the bad results of our bad actions. But in fact, much of humanity has been devoting its time to doing bad, trying to get good results out of bad action. That's one of the reasons why there's so much suffering in the world, is people trying to do bad actions in order to get good results. Another possibility is a get out of hell free card. In other words, that the good actions give good results, but bad actions do not give bad results, because I've got a get out of hell free card. One of the get out of hell free cards is taking Jesus as your Savior. You know, I've got a Savior now, He's going to save me. And eternalism is built upon that they have a lot of time, and that there's eventually going to be someone who's going to get me out of suffering. But the noble path is an immediate path, recognizing that we've got suffering right now and we need to get out of it right now, and there's no one going to help me to get out of that suffering. I've got to do it in my own mind. That suffering, in fact, is in my own mind. I put it there. Not the me that, I mean, there's no me there. I mean, but within the internal mechanism of the mind, that's where the suffering is created, and that's the source of the relief from suffering, is right there in the mind. And so this is what becomes one's right view. The right view is that suffering is immediate, that suffering is temporary, that it can be dealt with, and that the skills are here to deal with it. Let's get on with it. Okay, so this is becoming one's right view. Now, this sutta that we're about to discuss actually starts out with saying that what the Buddha is going to teach is, I'll go ahead and read it here, what bhikkhus is right noble concentration with its supports and requisites. Okay? Hang on a second. We've got a what? Oh, another birthday present. Oh, a new one. Oh, she got a bear today. Yeah, 2 days after her birthday, and they're still bringing her presents. Okay, all right. You want me to open it for you? Oh, you're going to do that yourself. You know how now, huh? All right. Well, let's show our friends here, because Zans on and Paul's
yeah,
still
show
here.
us, show us.
Yeah, show the present.
Wow.
Yeah, and we're already opening
That's awesome.
Yay! Happy birthday, kitty.
Happy birthday.
Big number 4. Do you remember your 4th birthday, Paul? Do you, Sam? Do you remember your 4th birthday?
I remember 7.
I remember mine, and I also remember the 5th birthday.
Wow, that's a birthday. Wow.
Have you ever heard the name Howdy Doody?
Yeah.
You know.
Okay, Howdy Doody was a children's show back in the 1950s, and it was a puppet. For my birthday, number 4, my mother bought me a Howdy Doody doll. And I was not happy with that doll. I was a boy, and I don't care if it was Howdy Doody or what. But they made up for it on the 5th birthday when I got a Lawn Ranger bicycle. and it was all black, and it had a scabbard with a toy gun, and it had the streamers out the bottom of it, just for a 5-year-old. So anyway, those kind of memories are available, but if I talked to my mother about it, she wouldn't remember. In fact, while I was really deeply into psychology, that's one of the things that psychology, they do a lot, is called archaeology, psychological archaeology, where you think about and remember and bring up what happened when you were really young, to try to go back in time. This is also...
You could use some of those good memories to initiate the joy enlightenment factor, right?
Precisely so. I was about to get into it, but we've already covered that in a way. Yes, in fact, it's the early childhood that is where people have the most joy. And so reminiscing about childhood is one of the ways of bringing joy into the mind for the practice. So in that regard, that kind of psychological archaeology can be quite beneficial. Unfortunately, in psychology, a lot of the time is people winding up blaming others for the suffering that they associate with childhood, and then they bring it forward like it was PTSD. The PTSD is a new term that they're using for warfare. You know, like people have stress of war. Listen, the human being suffers far more stress at the age of 3 than anybody did in Iraq. Being 3 years old is hard work. Being 2 is even tougher. That's why they call it the terrible twos. It's really hard to be a 2-year-old. But by the age of 4, unless the joy has been beat out of us, we become really joyful. As you can see, Kitty is really very joyful at the age of 4. That's something that we should look at as to, for instance, with your 6-year-olds, to try to help them keep that joy of life going.
Yeah, remember one day I was standing in magazine, and the old lady was buying piece of meat with, I don't know, maybe 5-year-old also near her. And that child was so into that meat, she started asking what we're gonna make out of it. Can you teach me different recipes? It's like super motivated, and the lady was apparently very tired. Stop asking me these questions. But I was surprised how this simple stuff so naturally interesting to that child. Like what we're gonna make out of it, what kind of meat it is, you know.
That's wonderful. Okay, use that or remember that as an example for yourself. Yes. When you're actually trying to develop curiosity or interest for development of the inspection of, is that suffering? What was that? You know, that kind of thing. Exactly. Get that childlike...
The learning mindset,
strong curiosity is exactly what we need in order to discover what is the path and what is not the path. Okay, so getting back to that basically this sutta starts with what is right noble concentration with its supports and requisites. Surprisingly enough, the Buddha never gets around to giving a long discourse in this sutta on what is right noble concentration. But basically what we can say is that eventually what right noble concentration is a sort of a unification of mind when a life is joyful. When your life becomes joyful, everything kind of gets centered or concentrated or whatever like that. The things sort of go in a... within a gravitational field so that things don't explode the way that they used to. This is what's noble right concentration, and it's different from the concentration of jhana, because jhana, that kind of concentration, is the kind of concentration that's useless for living a happy life. It's only useful when you're sitting in that jhana state. To where this unification of mind is a unification of mind that's there almost all the time. That's the culmination of the path. And so as I was saying before Zan came on, that then the Eightfold Noble Path actually becomes a Tenfold Noble Path when wisdom in the form, or in the word they use, is knowledge or direct seeing, and then deliverance. Now, this knowledge and deliverance that we're talking about here can also be seen as the last two of the 7 steps in the chariot race. In fact, keeping track of that, not chariot race, but chariot relay. That in the chariot relay, Sariputta is asking his, actually it was another teacher from another area that the Buddha knew, and that they knew each other by reputation, but they didn't know each other by sight. But Sariputta kind of knew who this guy was, and this guy didn't know who Sariputta was. So you've got kind of like a college professor with an unknown student coming up and asking him questions. But the student winds up being the dean of the college. Okay, so this is basically what's going on with this sutta, where Panna does not answer the way that people would expect. And the reason for it is because Sariputta was very clear and very careful to ask the question about each step. In other words, is morality the path to enlightenment? And the guy says, no, friend. And then, is purification of mind the path to enlightenment? Or what he calls the holy life is lived. And Panna says, no, friend. And then Sariputta asks, well, is it then for the purification of view? And Panna says, no. And people get really confused when they start hearing this, because all of the stuff that we hear about what is the path of the Buddha, Panna is saying no to this, no to that, no, it's not knowledge and vision of what is the path and what is not the path. And then the next two are no to the knowledge and vision of treading the path, and then the final knowledge and vision of what it's like to have arrived. Now, those last two things is what Buddha is tacking on to the Great 40, is that after you're practicing the path correctly, you begin to have knowledge and vision of what it's like to be on the path, the correct path. And then finally, the knowledge and vision of what it's like to have tread the path, which is the deliverance. Okay, so back to this chariot race. The reason that no is there for each one of these is because Sariputta was asking about each individual item, and the answer is no, not that item. But if you'll think back to the chariot race, we can say that therefore chariot number 7 does not reach the final goal of Rajgari, because you can't get to number 7 without having done number 6. You can't do number 6 unless you've done number 5. So what it means is that it's a package deal. Once you see all 7 steps, from the ordinary mind, the unenlightened individual, starting with morality, going to purification of mind, then he goes into purification of view, and this purification of view is the place where he begins to change of lineage. The purification of view here is knowledge and vision of what is self and what is suffering, etc., like that. The next 2 is then the eradication of doubt, because he's seen enough of it now to really understand that I too am temporary. I too am subject to death. I will die. There is nothing that I can do to prevent death. No religion's going to help that. Death is coming. I know. I can see it happening all around me. I can see it within my own mind, and I know that when this body is dead, that there will be no more me. In fact, the me that used to think that there was something after death, that self died years ago. That was a young man, and there's no more young man here. That self is dead. Once we understand that these selves that we think that we identified with are temporary transitions, then we're beginning to finish up with the doubt. Once we finish up with the doubt, then we become truly understanding of what is and is not the path. When we come to understand what is and is not the path, it's an eightfold path. Once we get on the path, it becomes a ninefold path. And once we finish the path, it becomes a tenfold path. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Zan? Did you catch that?
Yeah, I lost your thought because I was thinking when you mentioned this subtle suffering when people try to create permanent self, you know, and I was relating to my own example. So sorry, and it's
Okay.
very ringing the bell for me. So I was just lost in thought.
All right. So let me go back and repeat that thought then. That as someone is free from doubt and has true knowledge and vision of what is and is the path, that's when it becomes the Eightfold Noble Path. After he's been treading it a while and he really fully understands what it's like to tread the path, that's when the knowledge comes in. And then once he's tread the path to a certain point of, let us call it completion, that's when deliverance sets in, and he has knowledge and vision of the deliverance itself. And that's when it becomes a tenfold path. It's an eightfold path to start off with. As we're progressing along, it becomes a ninefold path. When we finish the path, it's a tenfold path that ends in deliverance. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay. And in this regard, right noble concentration is the unification of mind that it will take to tread the path. And a lot of that unification of mind has to come in the form of wisdom, in the sense of the right intention. The Bhikkhu Bodhi uses the word resolve, right resolve. Another word would be right determination, that once we understand the path, completely understand the path, we are absolutely resolved to it. We are absolutely bound to it.
What are the lower three fetters? Doubt and one is doubt, right?
All right,
Doubt,
the three
self.
lower fetters, number 3 is the most important to understand because that's what clears up the issue about the second fetter. The first fetter is easy. That's personality view, to see there is no self. The
Right.
third fetter can be correctly stated as knowledge and vision of what is the path and what is not the path. By having knowledge and vision of what is the path and what is not the path, the second fetter, regardless of what it's called, is also eradicated. Now, that second fetter is sometimes called doubt, because when you are finished with the doubt about what is and what is not the path, you finished with that. You're
Right.
finished with doubt. Another way of looking at it is when you have knowledge and vision of what is the path and what is not the path, that means that you understand what is not the path, and that is following the rules, rites, rules, rituals, doing what you're told to do this practice, squat and sit and call it meditation, or whatever it is that you're doing, thinking that you're going to get good results from it is not going to give you good results.
Right.
That what's going to give you good results is the path itself, and you have the correct knowledge and vision of what is the path and what is not the path. This is the hallmark, or this is the first 3 fetters that bound together brings one to the point of being fully Sotapanna,
Right.
fully in the stream. All right, but it has an additional quality to it that I've already mentioned, but I want to strike that home. The additional quality is that the Sotapanna absolutely wants to know, truthfully and honestly and openly, when he's done something wrong. All right. This is part of the reason why the monks have Patimokkha, is to give a chance for the monks to openly confess that's what they've done wrong. Not that they're going to get forgiveness from it, but because they're recognizing openly to themselves and to the other monks that this is what I've done wrong. And it's also an opportunity for other monks to challenge a monk in order to have him open up and say, yes, Okay? It's really a whole lot to do with honesty. This part of the path is tremendously focused on honesty, especially honesty for the individual about himself. We really, because we're now on the really Eightfold Noble Path, we really want to know what it is that causes suffering so we can be free from it. And that includes any and everything that we've done wrong. Well, you see, the normal mind is not in a state like that. The normal mind wants to avoid being accused. The normal mind wants to think that they're already innocent and they don't have to worry about being guilty. They're already good. To where the Sotapanna is curiously interested in rooting out all of the garbage. So an ordinary person is willing to live in a house that's full of crap. And all he has to do is ignore the fact that he's living in a house full of crap, or better still, he can blame somebody else for all the crap in his house. To where the Sotapanna, he wants an empty house. He wants to throw all that stuff out because he knows that he's liable to trip on it in the dark and stub his toe, his mental toe. He wants to get out of it. So this is one of the most important qualities of the Sotapanna is that he is absolutely intent on eradicating the suffering, including being, in some regards, brutally honest with himself. This brings on, by the way, a side issue or a side point. And that is that Sotapannas become excellent lie detectors. Because they're so dedicated to the truth and they want to know so correctly what is and what is not correct, that when other people start to lie, you can pick that up. You can start putting things together in a way that, see, normally we're in a society to where people are expected to tell the truth. Therefore, you're expected to believe that people are telling the truth. Therefore, you don't challenge everything. Sotapanna is actually out there challenging everything. Everything that's in his mind and everything that's coming into his mind. And what's coming into his mind is often wrong. It's often bullshit. It's often crap. It's often a lie that's either a lie that's repeated ignorantly, or it's a lie that's told knowingly that it's a falsehood. But that the Sotapanna will become actually quite good at detecting other people lying because he's so dedicated to finding out what the real truth is.
Right.
And so there's a lot of skills that we can do. For instance, one of the skills is to look for consistency. In other words, if somebody says this happened in the past, but you know that didn't happen in the past, then you can say, well, they're being inconsistent because I know that this happened and now they're saying that happened. And so there's a lot of, and that by the way is a lot more powerful than most people understand, because what they do when somebody just says something, we don't investigate, we don't look, we don't say, are you know, what's going on here? They just accept, because they're in a society that is actually requiring that you accept people at face value.
Okay.
This is actually a huge problem in the United States right now. I mean, the people have been lied to on a regular basis to the point that they believed it enough to where they voted for Donald Trump. And now the whole world is in quite a mess because people in the United States have been believing the lies they've been told. If they would stop and investigate, but you see, they don't have the skills of investigation. They've never developed those skills of investigation. Then, in fact, they're following the rules, which is believe what you're told. I mean, we were told as little children when you raise your hand in class, you can ask the question to the teacher only if the teacher knows the answer to that question. You cannot ask questions to the teacher that the teacher is lost on, especially if it's her area of expertise. Okay, so that kind of thing gets started in kindergarten. And we are raised on it to the time that we become adults. We're raised on to not investigate the world, to not investigate the reality that we live in. But with the Sotapanna, the strong intention. That second of the Eightfold Noble Path, right intention, is actually not right just because it's correct. It's right also because it's strong. It's really, really strong. The strong intention of investigating everything.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Go right ahead.
Before, just a couple of seconds ago, you mentioned that we become a good lie detectors, right? Or some bullshit detectors. Okay, then how we should react if we know that it's a bullshit? Because I already got myself a couple heated arguments, which normally I probably shouldn't be there, just because I smelled that is a nonsense coming in my way, you know? Just recently, like last week.
Yes, okay. Basically, you have two choices. One is you can follow the old ways of doing things, which is what most people would do, and wind up in an argument. The other way that you can do it is that you can bring compassion with your wisdom to the point of recognizing, look, everybody's a liar. Everybody's stupid. Everybody is ignorant. Everybody is foolish. Whether they're rich or poor, whether they're this religion or that religion, everybody is a complete idiot. And the only difference between me and that guy is that I know that I am an idiot and he's an idiot, and he doesn't know that. At best, he just thinks I'm an idiot, but he doesn't see himself as an idiot. He doesn't recognize the nature of suffering. Doesn't recognize it. So basically then what you need to do is to bring the compassion of the knowledge that we're all stuck in suffering and not add any more to it. Don't argue with people, because that's just going to increase the suffering that they're already in. But this whole practice is to come out of suffering.
But you know, people lie.
I mean, wait a minute, Paul. Does that help you, Zan?
Yeah, kind of. Like, you explained it very nicely, but should we let him know that he's like ignorant as well as me, or we just keep it to ourselves?
Well, you can tell him and check his reaction. If he's curious and interested, then you might continue. But if he becomes ferocious, it's better to shut up. Yeah. Everything, again, is in the moment. You'll have to make those decisions. Hopefully, you're going to make those decisions wisely.
Performing, right? Perfectly.
Well, they're in development.
Okay.
That's the question. Okay, don't look at perfection, look at development.
Okay.
Okay, Paul, what was your question?
Well, I was just going to say, people lying, it's to protect their, you know, their self-preservation, their self-view, you know, so it's due to fear, I think, isn't it?
Intuitive, right? Kind of.
There's
kind of impulse, correct. I guess, right?
Right. That if somebody is lying to you, like one example of that would be making up statistics on the spot. You see that with the politicians, but you'll see that also in the bars and the pubs and many places, that people will just, they say something, and when you challenge it, then they'll make up something, and that's the lie. Before it was a belief, now it's a lie. Why? Because they made up a justification. They know it's false. If you attack them on that, that's when you're also attacking the self. Why? Because the original opinion was just an opinion, and it could have come from anywhere without much ownership. They just hold it. But when they invent a lie, now that's my lie. Don't challenge me. Okay, that's when they get upset, is when you actually challenge the lie.
All right.
Okay, so don't challenge the lie directly. Don't tell them, hey, you're lying to me or whatever like that, because that's probably not going to get the conversation any further than it is at this moment. But you can laugh. You can laugh at the lies, but you don't have to insult the person by laughing. But that's basically what you would want to do instead, is laugh at the lies. Why? Because the lies that you hear now and understand to be lies are yesterday's lies that you used to tell without recognizing that you were lying at the time. So this really is about investigation in order to the removal of suffering. So once we have the strong intention, then really the path can be tread. But before we get to that really strong possible intention, we need to do some clarification about what is right view and what is not right view. Now, the Buddha starts in this sutta, I think at verse 4, when he says, therein, bhikkhus, right view comes first. And how does right view come first? One understands wrong view as wrong view and right view as right view. This is what is one's view. In other words, you have to learn to tell the difference between what is wrong view and what is right view. And so then the Buddha talks about, and what Buddha, or what bhikkhus, is wrong view. He then goes through a list of nihilism kind of ideas. There is nothing given, nothing offered, nothing sacrificed. In other words, he's the people who say that generosity means nothing. That nothing is sacrificed, no fruit are the results of good or bad actions. In other words, people who completely disregard cause and effect, or karma, because the kind of karma that is far-fetched is easily dismantled. But the Buddha did not dismantle all of karma. That which is associated with cause and effect is there. There really is good action that gives good results, and there really is bad action that gives bad results. For instance, if you're very, very thirsty, drinking a glass of water is a very healthy thing to do. And to not drinking it could kill you. Even so much as the next breath can be a very, very good thing. That's a good action. Take a new breath. Not taking that breath could be fatal. Okay, so in that regard, at that simple level, there is good action and bad action. Good action is breathing. Bad action is stopping. The Buddha practiced that too. He even talks about it in a place or two. Called the breathing lesson meditation, where he busted his eardrums because the body decided to breathe anyway, even though he was closing everything off. So what we're getting at here is there are people who think that there is no bad action. Therefore, they can go and they can harm anybody. They can become the big man in town. They can become the mafia don, and they're completely Teflon. This is an attitude that people can have. And it's a wrong attitude, because everybody is in fact subject to the normal progress of the cause and effect relationships. So this is part of wrong view, is to say that there is no good action or bad action. There is no other world. There is no mother, no father, no beings who are reborn spontaneously, no good and virtuous recluses and Brahmins in this world who have realized for themselves by direct knowledge and declaration that the world and the other worlds. So this is wrong view. When we come to think that in fact that enlightenment doesn't exist, or that people cannot become free from suffering, then that's really wrong view.
Right.
Okay? So basically what the Buddha is saying is wrong view is no, 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 no. No to this, no to that, no to mom, no to karma, no to religion, no to
Yeah, so wrong view is holding a view of something where you have no evidence. You have no evidence that it exists.
Precisely so. All right.
Yeah.
Zan, are you still there? I think he's left. Oh, he's okay. Here he comes. Okay, so Zan, we were talking about what is wrong view. Wrong view is basically saying no. No to this world, no to karma, no to monks who can become enlightened, no anything. Just no, 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 no. And the Buddha calls that wrong view. But surprising is the next part. And what, bhikkhus, is right view? Right view, I say, is twofold. Here's where things get really interesting. Right view, I say, is twofold. There is right view that is affected by partaking of merit and ripening on the side of clinging. And there is right view that is noble, taintless, supramundane, and a factor of the path. This is really, really profound now that we're beginning to see that, yeah, there's wrong view, which says no everything, but then also there's a right view that will say yes, but that right view is in fact a right view that's an ordinary right view that's held by ordinary people, that gives them an ordinary society, that does not ripen in detachment and freedom, it ripens in attachment. So, and what, bhikkhus, is right view that is affected by clinging, partaking of merit, ripening on the side of attachment? Here is what is given. There is what is given. There is what is offered. In other words, generosity, which is very well practiced in most of the religions. It's stronger, in fact, in Islam than it is in Christianity. The Christian charity and generosity. So generosity that the Buddha is talking about here is the ordinary kind of generosity that is right view. But if you think about it, that kind of generosity will somewhere have an attachment built into it. And what is that there is sacrifice. There is the fruit and the results of good and bad actions. There is, which means that people at this level are believing in the law of karma. So there are those who say no to the law of karma, and that's wrong view. And there are those who say yes to the law of karma, but that's a right view, but it's also a right view that ripens in attachment and clinging. There is this world and the other world. There is mother, there is father, there are beings who are reborn spontaneously. There are in this world good and virtuous recluses and Brahmin who have realized for themselves by direct knowledge and declare this world and the other world. This is the right view that is affected by taints, partaking of merit, and ripens on the side of attachment. One of the ways, by the way, that you can see this is that many Thai people will have great respect for monks who have attained. So what they want to do then is to feed these monks and to feed them better and more ceremoniously than they would an ordinary junior monk. At Wat Suan Mok, in fact, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa many, many years ago, I think way back in the 1960s, and it may have been even earlier than that, started the procedure of having himself fast on his birthday. And it became very quickly something that happens at Wat Suan Mok, that everybody will fast on Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's birthday. The reason that got started was because so many people wanted to bring him food on his birthday that it caused a catastrophe of goodwill. Why? Because everybody wanted credit. Everybody wanted to make merit by feeding the very famous monk. Because the feeding of the very famous monk is more beneficial to the merit gods than feeding an ordinary monk, you see. Okay, so this is one of the places where then the whole idea of doing things in order to make spiritual benefit out of them, This is what is the ordinary mind, or what we call the mundane mind, with the mundane right view. And so this mundane right view, when it talks about having mother and father and other things like that, it's actually, that's where all the rules, rituals, and all that other stuff will come in through the back door. So basically, wrong view is to say no to everything, and right view is to say yes to almost everything. But in doing so, that kind of view ripens an attachment. For many Christians, for instance, one of the things that it ripens into is political action. That in the old days, Christianity was very, very personal in the United States, that you got to get right with God. But somewhere back in the 1970s, some of the preachers started saying, now that you've got right with God, let's make America right with God. And so it becomes political. Another thing that can happen is that people will become overly attached to rites, rules, and rituals, in the sense like the Christians. These are our rules. We have them. Therefore, you should follow our rules also. Because we think our rules are good for us, we think our rules should be good for you too. And so this is where creationism and other really strange things begins to get taught in school, is because these are originally just simply religious beliefs that people were clinging to. And so you can see, in fact, this ordinary mind is where all of the actually almost all of the suffering comes from. That wrong view doesn't necessarily generate quite nearly as much suffering as ordinary right view does.
So right view is like good works, but there's attachment there.
Yes.
Right.
You're expecting the results of those good works. You're looking for the results of those good works. Here's an example of that. Somebody buys a very, very expensive automobile, one of the very special name brands or whatever, from a very special dealer, and one of the qualities of this car is that it's going to get good maintenance. So now the guy's paid for the car, and he expects good maintenance on that car. Unfortunately, no one at that dealership knows anything about that kind of car, because this is only a one-off, that dealer actually sells and services another brand. So now that this guy has bought and paid so much money for this car expecting excellent service, he's actually going to get quite bad service on it, because the technicians are untrained and unskilled on this particular brand of car. And believe me, things like Maseratis or even Mercedes need special training. That you can't be trained on a Chevrolet and expect to be a master mechanic on a Mercedes. Doesn't happen like that. All right, so this is a clear example of people doing good, spending a lot of money on an expensive car, expecting good results. And what he gets is a lemon instead. Poorly maintained, won't work, has to call the record service half a dozen times, and he's thoroughly pissed off. Why? Because he did not get the good results of his good works.
All right.
Now you can see that all over the place. People expecting more than what they get is because everything about good, or let us say mundane right view, has expectations built into it. Those can be expectations of going to heaven. It can be expectations of, and see, one of the things about the Christians' promise of going to heaven is that there's always a tremendous amount of doubt built into that. No one who takes Jesus as their Savior, even though every other Christian around them will tell them so, none of those Christians believe that they are in fact actually and truly saved, because they're still subject to sin. Only someone who becomes sin-free can be free also from the doubt about what is, let us say, the results of sin. And so when one is free from sin, one is also free from doubt. But when one is promised that they're going to get the results of being free from sin, and yet they know in their heart that they are still subject to sin, that's where doubt comes in. And so, in fact, even though people will scream at the top of their lungs that they know that they are saved and are going to heaven, they still doubt it. It still eats at their heart. Therefore, the Christians have all these ceremonies like rededicating your life to Jesus, or revivals, or other things like that to keep. Actually, all that is the money machine of the church capitalizing on the doubt that people have about whether they're actually saved or not. You see, if the ceremony of being saved worked, then people could get their what do you call it? Baptism service. They could get saved, and they could leave the church. They don't need the church after that. Why? Because they're saved now. The ceremony actually worked. What brings people back to the church is the doubt about whether they were saved or not. And that keeps the whole machine going. That's why ordinary right view is suffering, because it ripens in clinging and attachment. It ripens in a self. There's another kind of right view. Shall we get into it? Or do you have any questions?
I have to leave now, so I just want to say thank you for letting me join you, and have a good conversation further. I'll speak to you
We
later.
haven't even gotten into right view yet. Ha ha.
Yeah, but I can only spare 1 hour.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, I hope
Okay.
to see you on your own very soon.
Okay, I
Bye,
hope that as
Zans.
well. Bye, Paul. Good luck.
See you later.
See you later.
Okay, so let's read the next one. And what, bhikkhus, is right view that is noble, taintless, supermundane, and a factor of the path? Huh? What would be a right view that is noble, taintless, supermundane, and a path factor? Not only a path factor, but the number one path factor. So here it is. Let me read it to you. The wisdom, the faculty of wisdom, the power of wisdom, the power of investigation of the states, the investigation of states enlightenment factor, the path factor of right view in one whose mind is noble, whose mind is taintless, who possesses the noble path and is developing the noble path. This is right view that is noble, taintless, supermundane, and a factor of the path. Now, the first 100 times or so I read that, I said, wait a minute! Wait a minute, there's a scam in here. And the scam is that the Buddha doesn't actually say what is the right view.
Yeah.
But rather what he says, he leaves it at the level of investigation. Basically what right view is in this regard, if you'll think about it, is don't come to conclusions, keep coming to investigation. This is one's right view, is to don't come to conclusions, because once we come to conclusions, now we're trying to make something permanent.
But do you need to be enlightened to have a noble right view?
No, what you need is to develop the noble right view in order to become a Sotapanna, in order to know how to live your life.
Right.
All right? That the final goal, in fact, is not something that we spend a lot of time on yet, because that's not the work. The final goal is like the train ride. Getting to the station is hard work. Once you get to the train station, getting to your destination on the train is actually much easier than getting to the train station.
So the student doesn't have a noble right view in fruition until he's a Sotapanna.
That's right. That's
Right.
what it's all about. That's the change in lineage, is the recognition that I've either been in wrong view or right view whenever I come to a conclusion. That let's keep this middle path going. The middle path, in fact, would be between wrong view and right view.
Right.
or the mundane right view. So supramundane right view is neither right view nor wrong view, but it is in fact no view at all in a way. It's more, let us keep this investigation open and ongoing. Because in that's what a Sotapanna needs. The Sotapanna is in the position of understanding that it's dangerous to come to conclusions.
Right.
Subject to suffering. Subject to, because it will ripen in clinging. If we come to conclusions, it's better for our view. So another way of thinking about it in the physical world is that if you are, let's use the right words for it. If you're spying on somebody and you've got field glasses and you're up in the hills and you're looking at the city down below, and about the best you can do with your field glasses or binoculars is to see a bit of movement in a window. Wouldn't it be better for the spy to take his position, his binoculars, etc., and start moving around so that he can get a very, very wide, different group of angles about his target? To really inspect it from a lot of different angles, because if he goes around to the other side of the mountain, he may find an easy way in. But on the side of the hill that he's on now, when he looks at his target, he's stuck. He can't get in. So by circling the object with our views, of taking various views about things and checking through investigation to see, does this view fit, is a better way than being stuck on one view or one story.
Right.
To not hold views, in fact, to become free from views. That in fact the Buddha talks about it in the sense of the four modes of clinging. One of the modes of clinging is clinging to rites, rules, and rituals. Another, clinging to self. The third one is clinging to sensual desire, or sensuality or good feelings. They can either be had in a brothel or in the meditation hall. It depends upon the student. But they're still looking for good feelings. And then the fourth mode of clinging is the clinging to views. The clinging to views about this is better than that, or this is whatever like that. And you'll see people get into arguments in your country over which sport team is better.
Right.
Well, guess what? None of those sports teams are actually valuable or useful. Society could do without all of those sports teams. Every member of the sport team could go get employment someplace else. All the managers, they could bulldoze down the stadium and put something else up. And if the people weren't mentally attached to their sport team, it would probably be an improvement to get rid of sports.
Yeah.
Because look how much hooliganism is, I think one of the words that they use for it is because people are overly attached to a sport team. But anybody who will move from one city to another will begin to recognize that just because I'm in Lancaster doesn't mean that I need to vote or root for the Lancaster team. Or if I'm in Manchester, I don't necessarily have to vote or root for the Manchester team or support them or even call myself a fan. And the worst part of it is that neither the Manchester team nor the any of the other teams, for that matter, know that particular fan. That he owns the team, but the team doesn't own him. The team doesn't even know him. So why should he attach to a team that doesn't have any attachment for him? So that's a real great form of ignorance, of being attached to one football team or one sport team is better than another sport team. But then you can do the same thing with political parties, and governments, and countries. And you can see that, in fact, Buddhism is not very nationalistic at all.
Yeah. Some people with football teams, if their football team over a period of years is getting worse, and worse, they'll actually change their football team to make themselves feel better.
Yes. Change the name of it. Or maybe the owners.
They'll go to Manchester instead of Lancaster.
All right, they'll even change cities so that they get a whole new set of fans because the old fans are disgusted with them now.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know. I mean, the individual, he wants to feel good, right? So maybe he'll follow Liverpool, right? But as soon as Liverpool, you know, get relegated into a different division, a lower division, they feel bad, so they'll say, "Oh, I'm not following Liverpool anymore. I'll follow Manchester United."
But what they don't wake up to is the following that they're doing and how that following itself creates suffering and misery for them.
Yeah.
So the following of that sport team, and it doesn't even matter whether they change sport team or not, they're still following a sport team, and it ripens in clinging.
Yeah.
And that the way to not cling is to have a view that does not stay focused or fixed in any one particular place. Why? Because everything is suffering. Everything is anicca, anicca. Anicca vata sankhara. Let's be free in this mess. Let's not try to hold ourselves tight in this this flood. Let's just go with the flood.
Yeah.
Let us be swept along and not try to make it out of something else. All right. So at this point, then, the Buddha makes the next statement about wow, I lost my place. Okay, back over here.
I'm gonna go in about 5 minutes.
All right. Well, let's
need to go.
let's do this part because we've already covered some of the stuff that I should have covered next. I've already covered it. Okay.
All right.
One makes effort to abandon wrong view and enter upon right view. That is one's right effort. Okay. Once we understand that there is a yes and a no, or a this and or that, or this view is bad and this view is good, or this view says no and this says yes, but that you're not attached to either side of that, then that is one's right effort, is to stay away from the two sides of the argument. This is one's right effort. Mindfully, one abandons wrong view. Mindfully, one enters upon and abides in right view. This is one's right mindfulness. Thus, these states run and circle around one another. That is right view, right effort, and right mindfulness. Okay? So, in fact, what he's doing here is with right view, he's also bringing in the aspect of samadhi in the sense of right mindfulness and right effort. So now one's right effort is not the strenuous effort that many meditation students put into their sitting practice. One's right effort is to abandon wrong view. One's right effort is to abandon mundane right view and enter upon a middle path view that holds no views, but rather holds constant investigation.
Right.
This is one's right view. Now, right intention then follows along with that. Once one gets right view in this regard, then the right intention is to follow this right. So right intention has a lot to do with effort.
Okay.
We become determined, we become fixed, we become resolved. Let's see what the and bhikkhus, right view comes first. And how does right view come first? One understands wrong intention as wrong intention and right intention as right intention. This is one's own right view. And what, bhikkhus, is wrong intention? The intention of sensual desire, the intention of ill will, and the intention of cruelty. This is one's wrong view. In other words, the wrong view is the creation and the perpetuation of suffering. And what's one's right view is to eliminate the suffering and to no longer have it. And what, bhikkhus, is right intention. Right intention, I say, is again twofold. There is right intention that is affected by taints, partaking of merit, and ripening on the side of attachment. And there is right view that is noble, taintless, supramundane, and a factor of the path. And by the way, this word supramundane here in this sutta is why the noble path is also called supramundane as opposed to mundane. So Buddhists who are practicing in the beginning, when they're on Sila, when they're trying to get samadhi so that they can gain panya. The first three of the chariots is a place where they still are caught up in wrong view. But once one understands what is view, because of the understanding of suffering, then one also gets this really strong determination or right intention. I have seen it from places to where they just translate it as right thought, as if it was a giveaway, a throwaway, rather than an absolute strong determination. I want to know everything I've done wrong. I want to fix this thing. Okay, it's like somebody driving a car with a flat tire. A lot of people will know the flat tire is flat, but they won't do anything about it. They'll just drive along, and then we'll get the tire, whatever stuff's worse. But someone who actually is wise, they want to stop the car and inspect that tire. Well, just soon as hear or just soon as do something. They don't want to ignore the problem. Okay? That's what this intent of the path is. That hypersensitivity that's based in the investigation, constantly listening. A good driver will listen to his car. He'll listen to it a lot because he wants to know every little new squeak and thing like that. So that's also we should be very close to going on every week, every rattle. That is our intention. And what does noble to super mundane in the path is thought, the intention, the mental absorption. Okay, we're talking about it at the level of that kind of strong mind that is free from hindrance, that is mental fixity as a quality. It is direct information whose mind is taintless, whose mind possesses the noble path and is on the noble path. This is one's intention, that is no manufacturer of the path.
Right.
Okay, so it has a lot of the energy or whatever that take on and down the path. So far to say that we have our the weakness and we get powered by right intention.
Right.
That's the power that takes us on the path, is that right intention. And just in the views no less than that with that this way and
Right.
so one view is the factor of the enlightenment. And comes unremitting when it talks right is looking for the suffering in order for it to be eliminated. Okay, so I've got to you with our next.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, I have a question before we finish.
Next.
Okay. You think that valuable?
Yeah.
Yesterday that you had don't add a picture thing, but okay, they put the audio on you.
Yeah, I know how to do it already, so I'll put the.
Okay.
Okay.
Hope to see you
Take
soon. Bye bye.
Good